Hello, this is Mark Rogers from Discovery Bay Church. Today I'm going to reflect about how do we celebrate Christmas in this challenging, difficult time of COVID. I'm videoing this in December 2020 and what a year it's been. A difficult year, and I imagine it's going to be a difficult and different kind of Christmas for many people. And one of the challenges is how do we observe Christmas when we're really not in the mood for Christmas as we might usually celebrate it. Christmas usually being a time for celebration, for family and so forth. And this year is very difficult. I'm an expat living in Hong Kong, and I'm very much aware that many of my expat colleagues and friends here are feeling very lonely and isolated. We're a long way away from our families, and normally this time of year would be a time when people travel and reunite with their families and eat and feast together and catch up with one another. And that's difficult. It might seem a bit trivial, but it's one of the things that people value, time with their families and friends. But alongside that, of course, this year has been a horrendous year of loss and tragedy for many people, and I'm deeply aware of that, of many people who've lost their friends and families who have died, and many people coming to the end of this year with a great deal of trepidation about what next year will bring. Will we be able to survive economically? I know many people who've lost income or had no income over this past 12 months. What will the new year bring? Doesn't really feel like a time of celebration. In fact, really, maybe for many people, this Christmas is more like a time of mourning, of grieving, of bereavement, than of rejoicing. So how do we celebrate Christmas in that context? Well, three things are in my mind. First of all, it's Advent. This is a little explored season, Advent. I think it kind of gets quite forgotten quite easily. It's only a short season of 4 weeks preparing for Christmas. And I've always kind of felt keeping Advent was kind of almost impossible in our time, because Advent is meant to be like a kind of mini Lent, a time of quiet reflection, of introversion, of self-reflection and examination of one's life before God. And of course, for most people, this time of year is totally the opposite, right? Time of extroversion, of extravagance, of joining with people and feasting. And Advent, how do we keep Advent like that? Well, ironically, perhaps, this might be the one opportunity we have really to observe Advent as it's meant to be, as a time for quiet reflection. Many of us are finding we have a lot more time on ourselves, with ourselves, because of being more isolated than we might normally be. Well, let's make the most of that. Let's read, let's pray, let's do that work of self-reflection, of examination, of offering our lives before God and seeking again what God has for us, what God's purpose is for our lives moving forward. That's the work of Advent. Maybe we can do it this year a bit better than we might normally be able to. But then when it comes to Christmas, I've got a hunch, actually, maybe we can connect to Christmas a bit more meaningfully than we might do in other years. Because, I love the festival part of Christmas, the celebration and the jollity and the merriment and wishing everyone a happy Christmas. I always love that. But it's kind of not really in keeping with what the original Christmas was like. You think about the narrative we have of the original, the first Christmas. Was it a happy Christmas for Mary and Joseph? Well, I'm sure they were full of joy at the birth of their baby. But happy? I mean, this is a family in great danger. They're on the run, not just running, as it were, from Nazareth in the story to Bethlehem, but later, literally on the run from wicked King Herod. They become a refugee family. There's always a sense of vulnerability and fragility and danger in the Christmas narrative that perhaps we don't connect with very often because we've tended to sentimentalize it all a little bit. But the circumstance of the birth, I mean, it's horrendous, right? Squalid. Jesus born amongst animals, laid to sleep in a manger. You know, a manger is a place where animals would eat. That's poverty, real desperate poverty. And the Holy Family. I mean, this family got a few issues, right? Joseph, feeling very ambiguous about this baby. Is it mine or not? Should I stay or should I go? What's my role in parenting this kid? And Mary too, in the narrative, seems to be a young woman, maybe still a teenager, very vulnerable, open, certainly risking rejection, not just from her would-be spouse, but very likely from her own community and her family in the situation that she finds herself pregnant without before marriage and so forth. There's a grittiness about that. The Christmas narrative, once you strip away all the nostalgia and sentimentality. It's a story about God being present in the messiness, in the danger of life. That's where God is. That's something we can relate to a bit more this year, to understand that God is with us in the danger, the vulnerability and the fragility that many folks are experiencing right now. That's where God is. And the second way I think we can also relate to the Christmas story is this thing about light. You know, in Christmas we talk about God being born in the light. Jesus is the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness cannot overcome it. That's the prologue to John that's usually read out on Christmas Day in the morning. We're thinking about that. What sort of light is Jesus? And people hearing that way back 2,000 years ago, how would they think about that light? They didn't have light bulbs with the big wattage that we have. Lights then would have been oil lamps or candles, delicate, fragile lights in the darkness. And that's the kind of light that Jesus is. It's a fragile but constant light that shines in the darkness. And the readings in Christmas that talk about that light, very expansive. Talk about God's righteousness and God's justice, and God building up the ruined cities, proclaiming justice and peace to all the nations. A very expansive view of God's work and God's purpose. And I think we can perhaps we can touch base with that again. Christmas, quite often, of course, is a time for self-indulgence. I've got to admit it. And maybe we need to expand our Christmas a little bit more to see that Christmas there is a message of God's call to the world to follow the light, to make this place a better place, to think about what really gives hope, what gives purpose, what would really make things a lot better in our lives, in our world, to be generous and to seek God's universal justice and peace. So that's what I'll leave you with today. Difficult time to celebrate Christmas, but maybe there's an opportunity here to reconnect with this serious season of Advent, to do some quiet reflection, examination of oneself, and when it comes to Christmas, to reconnect with the gritty side of Christmas, with the God who's present in the midst of our danger, and the God who calls us to have an expansive view of what God is doing in the world.